Thanks, Annie. And thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Matt Hildreth. I'm the Executive Director at ruralorganizing.org Education Fund. Super excited that you all are here. Love seeing the results of the polling. This is what we hear from folks in the community time and time again. The concerns around jobs and wages in rural communities, decreasing daily expenses, improving the quality of life. And one of the questions we always get is, will it play in Peoria, right? That's what they say. And today we have the perfect person to answer that question. Representative Budzinski is from Central and Southern Illinois, called Peoria home for years, has been a lifelong fighter for families and working folks. And we are so excited to chat with you because the work that you are doing is so inspiring, especially for those of us that are in small towns and rural communities, and sometimes the forgotten flyover places. So we're really excited for you to be here. We have some questions that we received from folks, and also just to say, Congressman Kilmer wanted to be here, but was unable to join. So we will end with a video from Representative Kilmer. And so we'll show that as well. So we'll play that at the end, but we'll get to the questions in a minute. But I'm just curious, Representative Budzinski, as you're hearing these things, how do you respond, or, what thoughts do you have? And then before you take it over, I just want to say thanks so much for your work with the Young Farmer Success Success Act. I know there's a lot of people here that are concerned about farming as well as economic and rural development. So thank you so much. I'll give you the floor and then we'll go to questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Matt. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be with all of you from Rural Organizing, and also our RAN, and all of you as leaders that are really leading in this work around rural economic development. I share your passion, and please consider me a partner in Congress in this work. I think I was just taking note of what John and Arlene were sharing with us, and some of the challenges that you're facing in your states are some of the very same challenges that I hear about in the 13th Congressional District in Illinois. Whether it's around, I know Arlene spoke to veterans and some of the specific barriers that veterans face, in particular in rural communities, but workforce challenges, that last mile of broadband connectivity, it really resonates. So I know we share a lot of the same kind of opportunities, I like to refer to them, and challenges in our rural parts of our country. My district, I'd like to just describe it a little bit. It's quite a big district. I see a constituent, at least I know, in Marcy, that's on the call right now. So it's great to see you. And Marcy's from probably the most eastern part of the district in Urbana-Champaign. It's a big district that weaves through central Illinois. I live in Springfield, and then it drops down to the two counties that are just outside of St. Louis. So I am the furthest Southern Democrat in our state delegation, about 3 hours south of Chicago. I love this district for a lot of reasons, and it's my home for variety of reasons. I've found a lot of common challenges and opportunities to work on that I think will connect with what rural organizing is doing. We are a connected group of smaller, mid-sized communities, and farmland is what really connects all of our communities throughout central and southern Illinois. I like to talk about, some of the communities are really transitional in the sense that the clean energy transition is happening in real time in this district, whether it's, as we're moving away from fossil fuels into 100% clean energy. We also look a lot like the Rust Belt. I have a lot of manufacturing that I have the opportunity to represent in Granite City with U.S. Steel. We also have ADM, Archer Daniels Midland is headquartered within the district as well. So a lot of really great kind of assets that present opportunities and challenges. But, one of the things I would, highlight for you is the technical assistance, I know, which is something that is really a barrier to a lot of the federal grants that we want to be going after, is something I've been particularly focused on. I just welcomed Undersecretary Xochitl Torres-Small, who runs, as you know, the USDA Rural Development Office. I hosted her in the district in Edwardsville and brought together a lot of the small town mayors that are in this district to just have a conversation around technical assistance and all of the opportunities that are provided through the USDA's Rural Development Office. But we need more, and we need a lot of assistance. I think as we find out, and I heard a lot from my mayors in the district, that we just don't have the capacity in some of our smaller communities to make that application process work for us. So if a federal grant requires 25 to 50 hours to just complete the application, a lot of communities are challenged by how that grant application is actually going to get pulled together and work. I would highlight for you one of probably the highlights of my first 100 days in office. Just happened last week. I get to serve on both the House Agriculture Committee, and I know we'll spend a little time today talking about the Farm Bill, which we're starting to talk about on this committee. I also serve on the House Veterans Affairs Committee. But there's a community within the 13th District, Cahokia Heights, very near East St. Louis. It's a 95% African American, very small community, has a lot of challenges around capacity. But what they face is a decades-long problem with their water infrastructure. And specifically what I mean is sewage, raw sewage that comes out of government pipes and into the homes of those in that community. And this has been going on for a very long time. We have two great senators that secured some great federal funding. So the funding is there, but because the community does not have the technical assistance to really take full advantage of those federal dollars, this is an issue that people are continuing to live with, and that is completely unacceptable. So we had last week, the EPA administrator, Michael Regan, testified at the House Agriculture Committee, and I challenged him to this unique situation that we face, and maybe it's not quite that unique, but with water infrastructure in Cahokia Heights, and would he appoint a coordinator from the EPA, much like they did at Flint, to provide the technical assistance on the ground that this community so desperately needed. And I have to tell you, I was thrilled that EPA Administrator Regan committed that to us. What that means, we all know for our smaller communities, that type of assistance, I know we're not all going to get coordinators necessarily from the EPA, but it does just underscore the real unique challenge that we face in luring and collecting and taking advantage of these federal grant dollars that really make a difference in people's everyday lives. There are a lot of other, I just want to mention some other great opportunities that I'm, really tapping into in Congress is, being on the House Agriculture Committee. We have a lot of great universities. The Ag Tech Corridor really exists within, we lead the way in the country from Decatur to Champaign, because we're doing all kinds of agricultural research, both at our community colleges, but at our four-year, our land-grant university, the University of Illinois, is within this district. And so we've got a lot of really interesting and innovative work that is happening in some of our communities related to agricultural research. And so I serve on 3 subcommittees. One of them is the Agricultural Research and Innovation Subcommittee. The second is our commodities. We grow, as you know, in Illinois, a lot of corn and soybean, and we've got a lot of pork. But the third subcommittee that I am really very passionate about is about rural development. And so I am just so thrilled to be leading along with all of you, to be the House lead with Senator Gillibrand on the Rebuild Rural America Act, which, as you know, I think is so critically important. It provides a new $50 billion grant program and establishes the Rural Future Partnership Fund, which is something that I think will help communities like Cahokia Heights, help our smaller communities. And what I would really like to see is the technical assistance really provided through some of this funding. But to be able to really lead this piece of legislation in the House with Senator Gillibrand in the Senate, I know we are still working to see if we can get a Republican co-sponsor on this, but I think our target is to be introducing this legislation in May and use it as a marker in the Farm Bill. I mean, the Farm Bill is a great vehicle for us to really be highlighting the needs of rural communities and the unique challenges that we face, whether it's rural health care, something else I've been leading on through legislative initiatives around workforce, how we're attracting medical professionals to get trained, but don't leave our community, stay in our community and practice. That's something that for our veterans and the work that I'm doing on the health subcommittee is so important. So lots of different, I think, challenges, but I also like to talk about the opportunities we have in rural communities. But I want to thank all of you for the work you're doing around rural organizing. There are so many great and important things that I think we can be doing collaboratively together. And I really believe that this is also a space that doesn't have to just be a Democratic issue. It can be a Democratic and Republican issue. We can work together on some of these things: water infrastructure, broadband, workforce development, access to healthcare. Those are just fundamental everyday people things that we need to be doing a better job of. So I'll stop there, Matt, maybe, and happy to get to questions, but I hope I didn't filibuster for too long.
No.
I get really fired up.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited about, your work on this, and thank you for your work on all of these things. I'm really excited to hear about the Rebuild Rural America Act. We might have some more questions on that as we get to them, but one of the things I'm excited to hear from you is it seems like there's a new kind of generation in Congress that really is championing rural issues. I think you're definitely, you come to mind when I think of that new generation really kind of championing these types of issues. Can you talk a little bit about where that comes from? I know you mentioned that a little bit in your opening remarks, but why is, rural development so important to you?
Well, I think it's specifically the district that I have the privilege to represent, and really being in the community and seeing the very fundamental issues that, like we were talking about, whether it's broadband, water infrastructure. We get to, for example, as a member, I get to submit a CPF, community project funding, for different projects throughout the district. We had 37 applicants, 15 of them we were able to take. And I'm excited to say that a couple of them were both within the community facilities program that exists. And they're as simple as things like, investing in our Boys and Girls Club in Bethalto is one of them. Another one is a water main project in Pawnee. I think that those are the kind of projects that make a difference in everyday lives of everyone in this district. And so I think it's just meeting people where they are. Those are the communities that I was born into, and the people and the friends that I have at home that I know those are the issues they're concerned about. They're kitchen table type issues. So I just think that, again, I think one other thing maybe to mention, Matt, that I did mention before is a lot of the legislation I've introduced, whether it's on rural healthcare, workforce development, also have been leading on some biofuels legislation that supports our family farmers and, hopefully reduces our carbon footprint as it relates to our vehicles. Those are all bipartisan issues. And I really think that the other thing that's wonderful about rural development is it's an area that we can come together around, and it doesn't have to be so partisan.
Excellent. And, you've kind of seen now on both sides. You were fighting on the outside of Congress, and now you're on the inside. And one of the things we're really pushing for is equal outcomes for folks in small towns and rural communities. And I'm wondering, now that you have kind of both perspectives, do you feel like the system's working?
I think there are unique challenges that we face in rural America. I think that there are a lot of funding goes to more of the urban areas. I think that oftentimes one of the things I found fascinating as I've been starting to do this work is, what is the definition of rural? I mean, that also changes. And I think, we need, I think some, guardrails or guideposts around kind of what we need to be going after, prioritizing in rural America some of our unique challenges that people in urban areas aren't facing. One of the things that Arlene mentioned was for veterans that are seeking, say, healthcare, there's big spots between our clinics, our VA clinics, for example. Transportation is a unique issue that veterans face because we're in rural communities. And so I think it's a system that we need to be investing more in. I think we need to be prioritizing our rural communities and realizing that we can't have a one size fits all. I think we face kind of some unique challenges that aren't reflective in, small and mid-sized communities, different than bigger. And so the one size fits all approach to government also doesn't work.
Absolutely. And one of the questions that we got from a number of folks when we were taking questions through the registration was around climate change. And obviously with this being a farm bill year, and with a lot of folks in small towns and rural communities recognizing the leadership role that farmers do play when it comes to things like climate change. Can you talk a little bit about what we can do either in this farm bill or working into the future to really reaffirm the leadership of the farmers and folks working in agriculture that are concerned about climate?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, I'm also trying to lead a little bit in this space. I've joined the Sustainable Energy Coalition within the Democratic Caucus. And within that caucus, I've started the Climate Jobs Task Force. And that's specifically to look at the workforce, kind of what the workforce challenges and opportunities look like, and take a specific lens to in rural communities when we're building more wind, when we're building more solar, what is the workforce that we need, and making sure that those are good paying jobs. Because in a lot of rural communities, as we are moving away, I can speak to central and southern Illinois, moving away from fossil fuels, there's a certain set of jobs that are required for that type of work. And as we're moving into a clean energy economy, what are those new jobs and how are we training workers to be able to fill those roles? I think that's in particular very important. But I also think within the Farm Bill specifically, some of the conservation efforts, I'm on that subcommittee, we need to be being mindful and being protective of. There were a huge investment, as you know, in the Inflation Reduction Act and some conservation efforts, whether it relates to cover crops, how we're looking at pesticide usage. I think it's really important that we be very active in protecting that space and the funding for those types of programs, because I do think that the House Republican majority has made it clear that if it's not the nutrition program, it's also or the conservation programs that they're looking at cuts. So we want to make sure we're protecting those within the Farm Bill. But I also just wanted to mention, related and unrelated, is my focus on workforce and the clean energy transition.
And one of the things that we hear a lot from folks is about a distrust in government. And I think it's oftentimes because rural folks often feel like they don't have a seat at the table. And especially when it comes to things like infrastructure, whether it's pipelines or transmission lines or things like that. Can you talk a little bit about how we can kind of bring in rural folks into the conversation so that we can start rebuilding that trust?
Well, one thing I've been very intentional about is creating some advisory councils that are full of folks from within the district. So I have an agricultural advisory council, and I was very intentional about, yes, the Farm Bill or the Farm Bureau has a seat at the table, but I also have the University of Illinois, I have the USDA at the table. We have a very diverse set of stakeholders that are at that table that I think represent a lot of the different parts, and hopefully all of the different parts of the communities that are touched by agriculture, which is the entire 13th district. I also set up a Veterans Advisory Council to hear about some of the unique challenges that veterans are facing within this rural district. And a lot of that, again, can go to transportation, getting the access to specialty care that we have challenges with in rural America, getting behavioral specialists when we want to address things like substance abuse, or we want to address mental health. We have a really hard time getting those folks to come into the community and stay. So hearing directly, I think that's one thing that we can be doing that's really important, and meeting with those stakeholders and listening to them on a regular basis. I spend a lot of time traveling throughout this district to make sure that I'm hearing from folks in real time. One issue that I will highlight in my background is in working in the labor movement. I think in some of these communities that look more like the Rust Belt, like this district does, at least on the more southwestern side of it, where we have steel manufacturing that happens. I think some of the agreements that rural communities have seen as it relates to trade haven't been particularly fair to some of the industries that have been some of our more major employers. And so, I think that has also contributed to some of the distrust that some of these deals, while they might work for Chicago, they don't work for Granite City. And, I had a mayor, just to be honest, Matt, when I was running, he sat me down and he said, look, this is a tale of the haves and the have-nots. And the rural communities in this district are clearly the have-nots in the state of Illinois. And I think that might not be completely a fair, full depiction of, I think there are a lot of resources and good work that our governor is trying to do. But I think collaboration with state partners and local partners with the feds is really important in order to make a difference and to see that investment really come back to some of these communities.
And just going back to the Farm Bill, and because you mentioned Rebuild Rural America, I am curious how you, as we're getting into the next couple of weeks and months, like what are you hearing about the Farm Bill, and how do we as advocates, what's the best way for us to be thinking about the Farm Bill? Because sometimes it seems like nothing is getting done in Congress right now, and sometimes it's, people are talking about debt ceilings, and it feels like there's so much going on. Where do you feel like the Farm Bill fits with all of that conversation?
Well, I think the Farm Bill is a must-pass bill. I think there are very few things that I think you could ask Democrats and Republicans in Congress on that they can agree that the Farm Bill is one of those items that has to get done. It could quite arguably be the only big ticket item that gets done this year. The Farm Bill, as you know, it expires this year. It's only a once every 5-year negotiation process. I know previous Farm Bills have bled into the next year, and to be honest, I hope that's not the case here, but it could be. But I do think within this Congress, my hope is that we are going to get that done. I think there's a lot of organizing, and you guys have already, as leaders in rural development, have really already begun that work. But I think it is making the case for the Farm Bill and organizing around it in your communities, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around what the Farm Bill is. I think people think it's just about farmers and food stamps, and that's it. But actually the importance around rural development, the importance around agricultural research and innovation is so important. And one of the things that I want to be, and I will be working on with my team, is how do we tell the story of the Farm Bill from, all of the impacts that it has within central and southern Illinois. And it's quite expansive. From supporting food banks to making sure that we're doing more local production of food. We have a lot of food deserts within the district that I represent. So how are we doing more local food production to try to solve for some of the food desert and food insecurity issues that we face? All of that is really addressed in the Farm Bill. And so I think organizing, telling the story of all of the benefits of it, realizing that this isn't a bill that's going to get negotiated tomorrow, but it is a process that's begun. I think those are things that, we can continue to keep moving and working on.
Thank you so much for taking time. I know you have to go here in a minute, but I know we didn't get to all the questions that came in after the registration. So we might pull together some of these questions and send them your way to your staff, if that's cool. And like I said, thank you so much. Anything else before you go?
Just that I want to thank you for all of your work, and please see me and my office as a resource. And we want to be champions with you on rural development and bringing back as much of that funding that we can to these communities.
Well, thank you so much. We'll be in touch, and we'll talk to you later.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Marcy.